Welcome to the Leadership Variations Unfiltered podcast, where each limited run series tackles the leadership problems no one is naming, how women in STEM actually succeed, why leadership fads always fail, and where talent strategy breaks down when the stakes are the highest. Hi, I'm Amy Bladen from Leadership Variations, and I'm so excited to be here today to our first leadership podcast series, Cracking the Code from Underestimated to Undeniable. And today we are spotlighting talented women leaders who've risen into leadership in tough, high-growth industries, especially STEM. So this would be science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Today we are so pleased to have a guest, Laura MacDonald. She is the Chief Growth Officer from Hotwire in San Francisco, California. And Hotwire, as most of you probably already know, is a global communications agency that helps tech-driven brands connect with mainstream and consumer audiences through integrated, high-impact storytelling. I hope they got that right, Laura.
Yeah, that's good. Hotwire also owns ROI DNA, which is my little logo up there. So that's the exciting new part of our business as well.
Thank you for that. You ready to jump in?
Yeah, let's go.
So go ahead and let's start with where you are at Hotwire. You lead at a high level with impact that many women, especially women, really admire. So start by telling us something you're very proud of, something maybe others don't always see, but you know you've done this and we can't see it from the outside, but you're very proud of it.
I think one of the things that I'm sort of most proud of, like recently, obviously, as I mentioned, we've been bringing together these different marketing agencies that we've acquired over the years. And as we all know, kind of acquisitions can be tough and you're dealing with a lot of personal emotions and feelings and then trying to bring current business and these three new acquisitions together and how do we bring it all through? And I think I was talking to someone today, he said, I know where I stand with you. I know it's like a really personal thing to say, but just being really clear and direct. I think that's sometimes something that women struggle with, and particularly kind of also, I'm British originally, although I've lived in the States now for nearly 10 years. I think British people are pretty bad about being direct as well.
Bad? I think it's great.
Yes, I like being direct, but I think it's like something that doesn't necessarily have come naturally to me, but I think it's so important if you're in a position of leadership of being clear, being direct, and standing for that and having someone give you that feedback. It's like, I know where I stand with you, whether we agree or disagree. That sort of clarity, I think, is something that, I don't know, it came today and it just made me feel like, oh, I feel like I'm doing my job right then, if people who are working for me understand that.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about your path to senior leadership. In my coaching work with other senior women, particularly those in the STEM areas and technology, I hear about the shift from expert levels to enterprise leader. How did that transition show up for you? Was there a moment when your role or your mindset changed? Anything like that?
Absolutely. So I think we touched on it sort of briefly talking before this. So STEM is an interesting one for me because I started doing computer science at university. I was in math, physics at school, and then went to do computer science. And we're talking several decades ago now at this point kind of stuff. So there weren't many women doing computer science degrees. I think I was one of 4 in a class of 300 or so. And really feeling kind of a little bit alienated, having loved technology, and then deciding that maybe technology wasn't going to be the right thing for me, but I still loved it and I still was really passionate about it. So I ended up getting onto the grad program for communications, but worked on the tech clients because I was excited and interested and getting to do launch of Siemens mobile devices, which probably really dates me, kind of that. And then, you know, Samsung and GoPro and Microsoft and all of those tech brands, like really excited about telling those technology kind of stories. And so for many years, you know, I was working the agency side, really thinking through how do you tell those stories? How do you create big creative moments? Like we once built like a tree office in central London to talk about kind of being able to work from anywhere, which again, 15 years ago was pretty revolutionary and now is so normal. Then as I sort of progressed up and ran different units within different organizations I was at, and then within Hotwire, I think the big change for me was moving from being kind of like the person that always had the boss kind of thing. And then my then boss at the time, I was actually out on maternity leave, he texted me and he was like, hey, do you have a time to chat? And I was like, okay, sure. What's going on? Slightly nervous. Why is someone texting me while I'm out on maternity leave? And he had an offer for me to go and run our San Francisco office.
Oh, wow.
which was pretty amazing to be offered that. Often those things wouldn't necessarily be considered for women with families and that kind of stuff. But Hotwire's always been a place that's resolutely about performance and things. And so being able to move out and come, but having been a smaller cog in a bigger machine, for us, the San Francisco office was very new at the time. And we knew that we were going to want to do an acquisition to be able to accelerate, but they needed some stability. And so coming out and running an office of 3 people, but part of a bigger leadership team in North America, but really being that sort of, okay, the decision-making is on me now. And while I have very supportive kind of bosses and other people I can bounce stuff off, if I'm making a decision about where do we want to go in San Francisco? Who do I want to hire in San Francisco? Which clients do we want to go and how am I going to acquire those? It was on me to put those plans together versus being someone who got to execute plans that perhaps I co-created, but definitely had other people's input. And now that was with me. So that for me was the big moment of, okay, I've got to come here and I've got to show up as a leader, and a little bit of that fake it until you make it, I think, but also having that confidence of like, someone thought I could do this and I can go and do that.
So I'm curious, you mentioned before when you were in computer science, you were in a class of, I don't know how many, and you were one of 3 women.
Yes.
When you took this sort of pivotal role and you were leading, were you also, very few, I'm assuming, maybe I shouldn't, you were one of a few women and then you were leading a bunch of men? Is that true also?
So Hotwire has always been very female focused. We have female CEO. I mean, communications in general, tech communications tends to be a little bit more, but it's very female centric here. Okay. So I think it was luckily in many respects, that's probably why I've stayed at the company for so long as well. Like it's very much around equal opportunity. Everything's sort of on how do you perform and very flexible. And as I said, I think a testament to the company and how it sort of has always shown up of being given a really big offer and a big promotion while I was on maternity leave kind of stuff. It's really been a company that's always rewarded that. So, I mean, there were definitely like just negotiating the differences and managing a team of Americans versus British people, which is very different culturally. Even though we speak the same language, we really don't. So I think that was more of the thing to really get used to, I think, coming over here for sure.
So tell me about it. What did you, I mean, I think it would still be the stakes are really high, the visibility change. What did you have to change or think about doing differently to be still a senior level? It is a cultural difference. It's leading differently. What did you have to adjust to?
I think there was a couple of things that have really sort of stuck out of like how to go and do and be successful. It kind of goes back to maybe that proud moment as well. So as I said, I moved out to San Francisco because I was running the office here, but we'd have always intended to make an acquisition. And we ended up buying an agency here in San Francisco that was highly successful, much, much bigger than ours. So I went from being the leader to then being back into a bigger thing and running through all of that integration. And the leader of that business at the time, Barbara Bates, was a huge advocate for something called radical candor, which I'm sure you're probably
I know the book. Yeah.
And again, coming from the UK, it's very not like that, but actually really leaning into radical candor, it's actually so useful to giving people like positive feedback publicly, but making sure to always go back and give them that direct feedback, that more critical feedback privately, and actually how that can be a real help to people and their careers, but also help build those really strong trust between you and teammates and your bosses and your sort of direct reports underneath. And just really kind of that radical candor of thinking about that in that way is something that I think has been a thing that I've really held onto since I read that and then saw kind of other people modeling that within the organization. I think it's something that's just so incredibly useful. Sometimes you feel like worried about giving feedback. And I used to be very British about giving feedback, and you'd sort of tone it down and you'd kind of do the sort of, like, oh, I'll say a good thing and then I'll say the negative thing, then I'll follow it up with a good thing. And actually radical candor teaches you just to say it. But it's a learning experience. And you're both coming from the right place, that you're doing this to make that situation be better for them, to improve them, to help them grow. And really reframing that, I think, has been something that from a leadership perspective, I've found incredibly useful and continue to go back and refresh myself. I talk to everybody about it. It's like, hey, you want to give feedback to me? Like, brilliant, bring it on. I love that. But here's how you can do it in the right way, so it's going to be positively received.
Well, then tell me, so as a female leader, you have male people who are direct reports. How is that received, and how do they respond maybe differently? Or just tell me the challenges there with being the female leader expressing the radical candor. There's got to be complexities there. Leading as a female at the senior ranks, I know from my coaching, there are a lot of challenges. It's just this leadership is not designed for us as women. Tell me about that.
Yeah, and I think that's so true in many respects. And as I say, I do feel like I'm incredibly lucky. Like Hotwire it was like female founded and has always had very strong kind of female leaders in, but absolutely being conscious of having male direct reports and direct reports from different cultures as well. So right now I have people reporting into me from the US, the UK, Singapore, Australia. And so obviously, again, everyone speaks incredible English, but culturally we're coming from incredibly different backgrounds. And my learned experiences are very different from other people. And so what I've tried to do is use that radical candor kind of principle, but and that consistency. Like I will give you direct feedback, but I'm coming from a place of I ultimately want this to be really successful. And I want you to be really successful. And I want us as a business to be really successful. And that consistency of just like, I'm here to remove those barriers from you and to help you recognize when you're putting barriers up that we don't need to be there. And that's kind of how I try to come and give that feedback and stuff. And as I said, it was the feedback I had from someone today. He was just like, we've definitely had like sort of more tense moments. And I've definitely have not always agreed with you, but you've always been really consistent. So I've always known where I've stood. And that's made me feel so much more confident in what we're trying to do. And so I think that was from a male direct report.
That was my question.
Yeah. And so I think that's where you sort of go, okay, that to me was, as I say, it's a proud thing that someone just today said that, because it feels, yes, you'll moderate your styles to try and accommodate the cultural differences. And again, you can probably tell I read books. Erin Meyer's like the culture map stuff. I don't know if you've read that one. That one's really, really good to try and understand kind of that. But also people have different personalities. Some people are hyper organized and want to have running agendas. And some people just want to have a chat kind of thing, and try to moderate my style to fit what that's going to be most successful with. But having that core of my role here is to help remove barriers and help you be more successful and call you out when you're putting barriers in the way that are getting in the way of that success.
Nice. So as someone who's been really successful and continues to be successful, what is your advice to rising women leaders who are a few steps behind you? Maybe they're in a high potential program, they're in a STEM program, or environments that are not designed for them. What would you tell them?
I think probably the first one would be to put it out there what you want. No one's going to know unless you say it, right? And I think women, again, are particularly hard at that. And I think, whereas my career has really proved that. So before I got the job offer to move to San Francisco and I was on maternity leave, the January before that, I'd been in San Francisco. I'd come off the back of CES. I'd gone to meet with some clients in San Francisco. And I loved the city. I loved the energy and I loved the vibe, and lifestyle wise, it really suits kind of, I'm really into, my family's really into and things. And so I came back from that trip and actually was pregnant. I think I wasn't necessarily sharing it with people broadly kind of stuff. But I said to my boss at the time, like, look, I know we're building an office there. Now is probably not the right time, but if there's ever an opportunity, if you ever need someone to go to San Francisco, I'd love to be considered. Just putting that out there, just saying it, not in a like, hey, I need a move me kind of stuff. Like, don't tell them what you want, but just saying, look, just want to put that out there if anything happens. And then a few months later, there was some changes, and my boss's boss, because she went on and told her boss about that kind of stuff. And then he's the one that texted me while I was actually 2 months into having a new baby kind of thing. So I think don't be afraid to say what you want, but don't necessarily do it in like a demand. I need to have this now. Just like, I would like this. If you ever need it, I'd love to be considered. And if they're like, why not? And why not? Why couldn't I be considered? What do I need to go? And how do I want to show up and work towards something like that? So I think that would be the first thing. I think sometimes women have a bad habit of not saying out loud what they want. Or when they do, they're really sort of like, I need to have this now because I've been thinking about it and internalizing it for so long. But actually just putting it out there, like, one day I would love to have this, and I would love to start working towards what would I need to do to be considered for that in the future? I think that's a really important thing to put out. And then the other piece goes back to trying to be direct and using those radical candor principles to do that, because I think that if people know where they stand with you, whether they agree or they don't agree kind of things, like there's always going to be that trust between you. There's going to be that consistency. There's going to be that trust. And I think that goes a huge way in business.
I love that. I think back, I'm going to tell you the story, but I was leading a women's leadership STEM program, and I actually had them raise their hand. How many of you told your teams and your male colleagues that you were coming to this? And I think 1 out of 40 raised her hand. I knew it wouldn't be a lot, but I was shocked. And I asked why. And they said they were just afraid that people would look on that as reverse discrimination. And I said to say to them, the male program is every day. You're in it. Yeah. But that they should stand up with that candor that this is something I need to go to. I need to raise my voice and talk radically candor. So I love that you're emphasizing this. Thank you for sharing that. So you talked about development, you talked about you're still working, and I love that as well. If you're willing to share it, one thing that you are still working on for yourself, a growth need?
Finding the balance is probably, and I think many people would say that. And I think particularly
women say that.
And people with families as well. So I've got 2 kids and the school sports and all of that stuff. That juggle is real kind of stuff. And I'm incredibly fortunate, my family life and all of that kind of stuff. And it still feels like sometimes there's a balance. Like I was picking my kids up from camp yesterday and my son was running late because they'd got in late from like the activity they were doing. And I had a work call. And like that's probably sometimes still the struggle, because I think to get to a senior level, you have to have a level of ambition and a level of, you will prioritize that. And that can be difficult to balance that with the family stuff. And so I think sometimes trying to find that, and it's interesting, again, Barb used to talk about it. It's like, there's no work-life balance anymore because it's always going to be shifting and there's going to be seasons and there's going to be times. And how do you make them work together? I think all women and anyone with families will always see that in the workplace. And I think just being cognizant of that and thinking about that for people who work for you as well, but also that level of we are here to do a job as well. And so try to straddle the two, I think, is something that's going to be eternally challenging, but something to think about. How can you be the best at everything that you do? And that also comes with compromises.
Beautiful. Okay. We'll close with the undeniable take. What's one truth you'd share with a woman who's ready to lead but still being underestimated? What would you tell that woman who knows she's got it but needs help cracking the code like you have?
I've probably talked about it a lot. I mean, go read Radical Candor, go read The Culture Map. Both of those books are great. They taught me a huge amount. And then put it out there. Just don't be afraid to say what you want, but be prepared to put the work in to get that. You're not going to get it, particularly in today's world. Nothing comes easy, and there will have to be compromises made to achieve that. But if you can put it out there and you have good relationships with your bosses, which comes again from Radical Candor and things like that, then you can go and be successful and you shouldn't ever feel like you're being held back.
Beautiful. Thank you, Laura. This has been amazing, and we really appreciate your words of wisdom and the fact that you've taken time out of your extremely busy, as we know, schedule to take a few minutes to help women hear about your success and your advice to others that want to make it to the successful level that you have made it to.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for joining. For more unfiltered advice and tools that drive real business value, subscribe to our newsletter, connect on LinkedIn, or book a consult, because leadership development fails when we solve the wrong problems. Find all links below.